our caucus is that we've fielded 145 candidates out of 163. The first time we've had this many in more than a decade. I think that, well, I'm personally very pleased that tens of thousands of Missourians are going to have a choice on the ballot this year, and I also believe that it's a good indicator as to the changes that Missourians are going to want come November. Then, obviously, the second big news is our budget. Our caucus is obviously more concerned about what is not in the budget than what is. A couple of quick highlights, and we'll start out with House Bill 2002, which is public education, and I suspect that you're hearing from the majority party how the foundation formula was fully funded, but I also suspect that the one little piece that they left out of that is the fact that they're doing it by a shell game, and the bottom line is that transportation for our public school students in K through 12 is underfunded by about $280 million. Putnam County is a great example, a county with about 4,000 residents, and they're underfunded by about $185,000. The Rockwood School District in St. Louis County, about 22,000 students and more than $2.5 million underfunded in transportation costs. So I don't know about you guys, but from everything I've ever heard, kids that aren't able to sit in class tend to not have great educational outcomes. So we can talk about the foundation formula, but if we're not going to talk about it also in terms of transportation, we're not giving Missourians a full picture of what's going on. Higher ed is another big issue. Although the budget process did restore some of the cuts recommended by the governor, at the end of the day, we are funding our higher ed at 1990s levels. And again, my mortgage is higher, my costs of living are higher, and we're asking our higher education institutions to do more with less money, and all of this just serves to make college education further and further out of reach for middle-class Missourians. I don't find that that's acceptable, and I believe that many Missourians would agree with me. Finally, cuts to the MOARX program and cuts for in-home services for our seniors and persons with disability, despite repeated promises from the majority party, were not restored in this budget project. We were told in midsummer last year that there would be a solution to this problem within count them, 2 weeks. Here we are 7 months later. Not only is there no solution, but Republicans proposed a budget that basically made those cuts permanent. That is also unacceptable. Our seniors and our persons with disabilities deserve more, and they should get more, and our caucus will continue to fight for them. After all that, I'm going to let Representative Kendrick, who is a ranking member of our budget committee, to fill in the blanks.
Sure. And I'd be more than happy to take questions on the budget as well. So, you know, we have a finite amount of resources, right? A limited amount of resources in the state. I feel that we've come to a responsible budget given the amount of resources available to us, and that's part of the problem, right? I mean, we've seen a decade of tax cuts that have put us in a difficult position, basically where, you know, I mean, I was on the floor, I was celebrating the fact that we, you know, basically held higher education harmless this year, right? That we were able to restore the proposed cuts to higher education this year, but that doesn't do anything to touch the hundreds of millions of dollars that was cut from the budget last year out of higher education. You know, it's part of the problem. When we talk about responsible budgeting, we also have to look at past decisions and how they impact the current budget. Past decisions of the General Assembly have put us in a very difficult position on funding our priorities. And I know talk about, you know, growing government and being inefficient or irresponsible with state taxpayer dollars. I'm talking about being responsible and funding education, transportation appropriately, and funding higher education appropriately, paying state workers so they're not 50th in the nation in state worker pay, and that they can, you know, provide for their families and be compensated appropriately for the work that they do and the sacrifices they make for the state. You know, also talking about making sure that we can fund MoDOT appropriately, and that we're not spending down our MoDOT reserves at a quick pace that's going to put us in a difficult position in the future on just meeting our federal highway matching funds. I'm also talking about, you know, providing consumer-directed services to people with disabilities, and providing prescription drugs for seniors in the donut hole. You know, those programs are important. They've been proven to work. And we need to make sure that we can do everything that we can to fund them responsibly. Again, we have a finite number of dollars coming in that we expect for FY19. With that being said, this is a responsible budget, but it does not. But it's a snapshot. It does not reflect the tax policy we passed that makes a lot of general revenue never come into the state.
questions.
The speaker, Scott Fitzpatrick, when asked about the in-home services and nursing care, said a lot of the problem was in the Senate over differences in the circuit breaker tax. I mean, do you think that's accurate? Is that where the logjam is?
Well, we're the House, and we just passed a House budget, and so it seems to me that our responsibility is, I'm going to vote for the bill that's in front of me right now, and the bill that was in front of us right now did not restore those cuts. And again, more importantly, the people of Missouri have been promised for 7 months that there would be a solution. We have yet to see anything remotely close to a solution. In fact, what we're seeing is a budget bill being passed out of the House that says we don't care about our seniors and we don't care about persons with disabilities because we are not doing anything to restore those cuts. Folks that have worked their entire lives that are in the donut hole, they deserve better from us.
Leader Mitten and Representative Fitzpatrick, two-part question about the budget. One, Chairman Fitzpatrick specifically praised you for your work, and you praised him. You don't agree, but if you talk about that. But two, Representative Franks on the floor said that there were Republicans on the floor, he said, that were smirking and were ignoring Representative Lavender. So if you could talk about that as well. Did either of you see what he was referring to today? I'm assuming it was today.
I didn't personally witness that. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, and it's all on videotape, so I'm sure that folks can come to their own conclusions by looking at the video.
And I didn't necessarily see, but I was
Sure.
preparing for the next remarks, right? But Chairman Fitzpatrick and I, there are differences that we have, but there's a lot that we also agree on. And I think, there was. The budget committee works hard, and the budgeting process, it tends to be, it's one of the more nonpartisan committees that we have, right? You're given a limited amount of resources, and you try to find the best way to spend the dollars responsibly for the state. There are differences philosophically at times, but those don't necessarily show up in partisan games on the budget committee. Again, I think partly the frustration of many people in the minority party on the Democratic side is just kind of the taxation policies that we've had, not necessarily this year, but in years past, that have put us in a difficult position where we don't have the revenue coming in to fund programs that have proven to work.
I think it's important to point out as well that we can disagree without being disagreeable, and any member of this body that doesn't abide by that philosophy should be called out on it. So it's problematic. It's obviously problematic to me if what was being described was actually happening. But there's no room for name calling. We can disagree and disagree respectfully, and I would hope that all members of the body abide by that philosophy.
Tax package is working its way through the Senate. What are your thoughts on the proposal from Senator Eigel and the proposal that you have here in the House from Representative Clark?
Yeah, I think it's like a 450-page bill, or close to 450 pages, and I think they perfected it in a matter of maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'm not sure. How did that happen? I'm pretty concerned with the speed at which they perfected a very complex tax bill that has a lot of moving parts. I think that there are some major concerns with the estimates that are being put out there, potentially another 500 to 800 million plus in lost revenue, and if there's the possibility that some of those calculations are wrong, as I said, there's a lot of moving parts. Are we just doubling down on tax cuts at this point? Are we going to end up in a position much worse than Kansas? Kansas, as I've said multiple times, they've let all their money out basically overnight. They bankrupted their state in a matter of a couple years, and then they had the census last year to undo the vast majority of those tax cuts that were passed in 2013 because they saw immediately the damage that they had done to their state. We are just now planning for the second-year phase-in of Senate Bill 509. That's a 5-year phase-in, just now preparing for the second-year phase-in. And that's $240 million that we had to basically wipe off the books this year in the budgeting process as we prepare for it. That's, I don't know how you perfect a 450-page bill that has so many moving parts that could have an impact of, $500+ million in lost revenue in a matter of 20 minutes, and think that's responsible.
I think we need to ask ourselves, Kansas is our neighbor, okay? We saw what they did. They decided to just stop maintaining their state, and we saw their state fall apart. If you look at your neighbor's house and realize they're not painting, they're not keeping up with their roof, the sidewalk is cracked, do you say to yourself, well, that's the way that I want my house to be too? No, you say to yourself, I think that it's time to put some money into the infrastructure that is our home. And why the Republican Party seems to think that the good idea is to just follow the same path is beyond me, frankly. We've already talked about the fact that our public education is in trouble. Our roads and bridges are in trouble. Our seniors are in trouble. What more trouble do we need to put Missourians in just to win elections?
On the subject of roads and bridges, one of the talking points about the Republican proposals is that they have these either licensing fees or gas tax for use on roads. What would a bill like this mean for different parts of the state budget, different services that Missouri provides?
Not sure.
Are you talking specifically the tax cut bill that was proposed in the Senate? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't necessarily seen it yet. I do have concerns at any point when we're talking about basically cutting a significant amount of income tax and then raising user fees and raising sales taxes, right? I mean, we generally all need the same amount of food. We generally all need the same amount of clothing in order to survive. When you cut income tax tremendously and then try to somehow maybe balance it by raising user fees and sales taxes, then all you're doing is helping the richest Missourians and harming the poorest Missourians. And we've seen it at the national level over and over. We continue to see it at the state level. It's ridiculous. I mean, the people who are suffering from the budget cuts of FY18 are the very people who would be paying higher fees and higher sales tax and higher, you name it. That's problematic. I mean, this isn't about class warfare. I am very pleased that there are wealthy people. I believe in capitalism. I believe I'm proud of their accomplishments and their ability to make money. We don't need to continue to write policy that just benefits them and hurts everyone else. That's irresponsible.
Representative Mitten, I have one more question about MetroLink. Chairman Mathieson and Gretchen Bangert, the ranking Democrat, heard testimony. I was there at the committee hearing about MetroLink safety, and Mr. Nations testified that they need what he called a dedicated transit police force. Their ridership has dropped, I want to say, from 17 to 14 million. Don't know if it goes through your district, but I know it's close, Metro. What are the chances of this dedicated transit police and the concerns about the crime that were raised in there as far as what was brought up?
Well, there are obviously concerns about that, and frankly, I look at it as a broader issue about crime in the St. Louis area generally, and that needs to be addressed. And again, part of my philosophy is that we address those problems by addressing the issues of poverty, of hunger, of health insurance, of joblessness, of homelessness. And so my hope would be that this body can spend some time addressing the larger issues. I certainly understand the need to make sure that MetroLink is running. I'm a MetroLink rider, and there are at least 2 stops in my district. But putting a Band-Aid over MetroLink doesn't address the larger issues, and those issues not only impact crime, but they impact economic development. And those are the bigger issues that I really feel that we should be talking about. That's it? Great, thanks.
All right.